Eli James had always believed his life was on the right track. As a rising detective in New Orleans, he had solved some of the toughest cold cases the city had seen. His career was thriving, but what really mattered to him was his relationship with Noah Carter. They had been together for 6 years, a time filled with love, mutual support, and shared dreams. Noah, a gentle and caring nurse, had always been Eli's anchor amidst the chaos of his work. They had plans, a house, maybe kids one day, and a future that seemed to be set in stone. Lately, though, things had changed. Noah had become distant, often coming home late from work, too tired to spend time together, too distracted during their once comforting conversations. Eli told himself that it was just the stress of their jobs, that things would get better. But a small, gnawing feeling in the pit of his stomach wouldn't go away. He started to notice the little things, the way Noah would glance at his phone and then put it away quickly, the unexplained absences, and the nights when Noah would claim to be working late but something didn't feel right. One evening, after wrapping up a long and exhausting case, Eli returned home to find his work USB drive missing. He was sure he had left it on his desk. It wasn't like him to misplace things, especially something as important as case evidence. Frantic, he began searching the house, pulling apart drawers and checking every corner. As he rifled through the trash bin, something caught his eye, a small, crumpled envelope buried beneath papers. Curiosity turned to dread as he pulled it out and unfolded the contents. The envelope held several intimate letters exchanged between Noah and another man. As Eli's eyes scanned the lines, the name Ryan Matthews *** leapt out at him. Ryan. Noah had mentioned him once, in passing, as an old flame from his past. Eli never thought much of it back then, but now these letters told a different story. Noah and Ryan had rekindled something that Noah had kept hidden. The words in the letters spoke of emotional connection, meetings in secret, and a bond that Eli thought had been exclusive to him. Eli's heart pounded. Betrayal, anger, confusion, all rushed through him at once. He couldn't bring himself to confront Noah immediately. He needed to know more, to be sure. Confronting a man in the middle of a case was different from confronting the love of his life. With the precision and care of a detective, Eli decided to investigate further. Over the next week, Eli installed hidden cameras in their home. It was a move that made his stomach churn, but he needed the truth. He needed to see it with his own eyes. During the day, he focused on his work, solving cases as usual. But at night, when Noah was at the hospital, he would review the footage. Each night, as he sat alone in their bedroom, the weight of the impending truth hung over him like a storm cloud. On a Wednesday evening, after watching several clips of normal daily activity, Eli saw it. The footage showed Noah opening the door to their house and welcoming Ryan inside. They laughed, talked, and shared moments that should have belonged only to Eli. Then, a few clips later, Noah and Ryan were in the bedroom. Eli could barely bring himself to watch as the two men lay in the bed that he shared with Noah. It wasn't just the physical betrayal that hurt Eli the most, it was the intimacy. The way Noah looked at Ryan, the way he touched him, spoke to him. Eli's world collapsed in those few moments. He couldn't sit back anymore. That evening, when Noah came home, Eli was waiting for him at the kitchen table. The letters were spread out before him, along with a flash drive containing the footage. The tension in the air was palpable, and Noah's face immediately drained of color when he saw the evidence. Eli, I can explain, Noah began, but Eli's voice, cold and distant, cut him off. Don't, Eli said. Don't insult me with lies. Noah sank into the chair across from him, tears welling up in his eyes. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Ryan he came back into my life, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, Eli responded, his voice steady but hollow. You hurt me in the worst way possible. You betrayed me, Noah. You betrayed us. There was a long, suffocating silence between them. Eli wanted to scream, to break something, to do anything that might alleviate the pain coursing through his veins. But instead, he just stared at the man he had once believed he would spend his life with, now a stranger sitting across from him. I love you, Eli, Noah whispered. I never stopped loving you. With Ryan, it was a mistake. Eli shook his head. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or a fight over something small. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. A choice you made over and over again. Noah's tears fell freely now, and Eli had to look away. Seeing Noah break down hurt more than he wanted to admit, but it didn't change the reality. For days, Eli couldn't focus on anything. He packed a bag and moved out, leaving behind the home they had built together. He took time off from work, something he had never done before, and stayed with his sister in a quiet neighborhood outside the city. He needed space to think, to heal, to figure out whether he could ever forgive Noah, or if he even wanted to. The days turned into weeks, and Noah reached out to Eli several times, pleading for a chance to make things right. But Eli wasn't ready. Every message, every call brought the betrayal crashing back. He wasn't the same person anymore. The man who had once been confident in love and life now felt broken, unsure if he could ever truly trust someone again. Noah and Ryan's affair fizzled out, as Eli had expected. The heat of passion eventually burned out, leaving only the cold reality of what had been destroyed in its wake. Noah tried one last time to reconcile, but Eli knew deep down that things would never be the same. Months passed, and Eli slowly began to piece his life back together. He returned to work, finding solace in the cases he solved, and bit by bit, the pain began to fade. He learned to accept what had happened, even if it would always leave a scar. He had loved Noah with everything he had, and maybe part of him always would. But that chapter of his life was over. One evening, Eli sat alone on a park bench overlooking the Mississippi River as the sun dipped below the horizon. He thought of Noah, of the good times they had shared, and he smiled, not with sadness but with acceptance. He had survived. He had come through the storm. And for the first time in a long while, Eli felt hopeful about what the future might bring. As Eli sat on the park bench, the wind gently brushed past him, carrying with it the scent of the nearby river and the sounds of life moving forward in the distance. The memories of Noah, once painful and sharp, now felt like distant echoes. He had spent months rebuilding his sense of self, finding solace in his work and in the quiet moments of solitude. But tonight, as the sky darkened and the stars began to twinkle above, Eli realized he was ready to move on. Just then, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from Julian Evans, his colleague and someone he had grown closer to over the past few months. Julian had been a quiet presence in his life after the breakup, always offering support in subtle ways, never pushing too hard, but always there when Eli needed someone to talk to. Julian's message was simple: dinner at that new place by the river. No pressure, just thought you could use some company. Asterisk. Eli hesitated for a moment. After everything that had happened, opening himself up to anyone again felt risky. But he knew that life didn't stop, and neither could he. Maybe it was time to take a small step forward. Sure, I'll meet you there in 30, Eli replied, slipping the phone back into his pocket. At the restaurant, the soft glow of candlelight reflected off the windows as Eli entered, scanning the room for Julian. He spotted him at a corner table, his face lighting up when he saw Eli approach. Julian stood, offering a warm smile, his usually serious demeanor softened by the casual setting. Glad you could make it, Julian said, his voice calm but with a hint of something more, something that Eli hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge before. They settled into the conversation easily, talking about work, mutual friends, and the latest cold case that had been giving Eli trouble. Julian listened attentively, offering insights that Eli hadn't considered, and for the first time in a long while, Eli felt a sense of peace wash over him. As the evening progressed, the conversation shifted to more personal topics. Julian leaned forward, his voice softer now, as he asked, "How have you been?" "Really?" Eli paused, thinking about everything he had been through. The betrayal, the pain, the countless nights of wondering if he would ever feel whole again. And yet, here he was, sitting across from someone who genuinely seemed to care about him. Someone who had been there through the toughest months of his life. "I'm getting there," Eli said, a small smile forming. "It hasn't been easy, but I'm learning to let go. I guess, I'm ready to move on." Julian nodded, his eyes meeting Eli's with an intensity that made Eli's heart skip a beat. "You don't have to rush anything," Julian said, his voice gentle. "I just want you to know that I'm here. Whatever you need, even if it's just a friend." For a moment, the two of them sat in silence, the weight of the unspoken possibilities hanging between them. Eli appreciated Julian's patience, his understanding. It was refreshing after the whirlwind of emotions he had been through with Noah. He wasn't ready to jump into anything serious, but for the first time in months, he felt like he might be open to the idea of letting someone new into his life. As they left the restaurant and walked along the riverbank, Julian casually brushed his hand against Eli's, a small, tentative gesture that spoke volumes. Eli didn't pull away. Instead, he allowed the moment to be what it was: simple, unpressured, and real. In the weeks that followed, Eli and Julian began spending more time together. They took things slow, enjoying each other's company without the complications of expectations. Julian understood that Eli was still healing, and he never pushed for more than Eli was ready to give. It was exactly what Eli needed: a relationship built on mutual respect and patience. Noah occasionally tried to reach out, sending the occasional message, but Eli had moved past the point of needing closure from him. The door to that part of his life had closed, and he wasn't interested in reopening it. His future was no longer tied to the heartbreak he had endured. One evening, months later, as Eli sat on his couch, wrapped in a comfortable silence with Julian beside him, he realized just how far he had come. Julian's arm was casually draped over the back of the couch, and the warmth of his presence was comforting, not overwhelming. Eli looked over at Julian, who was focused on the documentary they were watching but seemed to sense Eli's gaze. Julian turned to him and smiled, a soft, knowing smile that spoke of understanding and a deep connection that had been quietly building between them. "I'm glad you're here," Eli said, his voice barely above a whisper. Julian's smile widened, and he leaned in slightly, his eyes warm and full of affection. "So am I." Eli's journey hadn't been easy, and there were still moments when the past tugged at him, reminding him of the pain he had endured. But now, with Julian by his side, he felt like he was finally stepping into a new chapter. One where trust could be rebuilt, where love could be rediscovered, and where he could move forward without the weight of betrayal holding him back. As the sun set over the New Orleans skyline, casting the city in a golden glow, Eli realized that he had found something he hadn't expected: peace. And with it, the hope of a future filled with love, trust, and the quiet, steady presence of someone who truly saw him for who he was. The scars from his past would always be there, but they no longer defined him. They were simply part of his story, a story that was far from over. Eli had moved on, and in doing so, he had found something even greater than he had before: a chance at real happiness. As the weeks continued to pass, Eli and Julian's relationship grew in ways that Eli hadn't anticipated. What had started as a supportive friendship, born out of mutual understanding and shared experiences, had slowly turned into something deeper, something real. Eli had been careful not to rush into anything, but it became harder and harder to ignore the connection they shared. Julian had shown patience and kindness, something Eli hadn't known he needed until he experienced it. Julian wasn't just there when Eli needed someone to talk to; he was present in the small, quiet moments of Eli's life, offering comfort without saying a word. One evening, as they sat together on Eli's balcony overlooking the lively streets of New Orleans, the hum of jazz music drifting through the air, Julian reached out and took Eli's hand in his. "I've been thinking," Julian said quietly, his thumb gently stroking Eli's palm. "About us." Eli's heart raced for a moment, but he didn't pull away. He turned to Julian, meeting his calm, steady gaze. "I don't want to pressure you," Julian continued, "but I also don't want to pretend that I don't feel something strong between us. I care about you, Eli. And I know you've been through a lot, so I'm willing to take things as slow as you need, but I just want you to know I'm here for more than friendship." Eli's chest tightened, but this time, it wasn't from fear or uncertainty. He felt a warmth in his heart that had been missing for so long, a spark that he thought had died with the end of his relationship with Noah. "I care about you too, Julian," Eli admitted, his voice steady. "And I won't lie, it's been hard to open up again after what happened. But with you, things feel different. Safer." Julian smiled softly, a look of relief washing over his face. "That's all I want, Eli. Just for you to feel safe. To know that I'm not going anywhere." They sat in comfortable silence for a while after that, the sound of the city below blending with the gentle breeze that rustled through the leaves. Eli felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time: hope. Hope for something new, something honest, something that didn't come with the weight of betrayal. As the night deepened, Eli found himself leaning into Julian's side, letting the warmth between them grow. It was natural, effortless, and it felt right in a way that Eli hadn't experienced in years. He closed his eyes, allowing himself to simply exist in the moment, trusting that whatever happened next, he was ready for it. A few months later, Eli found himself facing a familiar yet uncomfortable situation. Noah had reached out once more, this time asking to meet for coffee. He said he needed closure, a proper goodbye, and though Eli had long since moved on, he agreed to meet. Something inside him told him that hearing Noah out would be the final step in putting the past behind him. They met at a small cafe on the edge of the city, the same one where Eli and Noah had spent countless afternoons together during their early days of dating. When Eli arrived, Noah was already seated at a table by the window, nervously stirring his coffee. His eyes lit up when he saw Eli, but there was a sadness there too, a heaviness that hadn't been there before. "Thanks for coming," Noah said quietly as Eli sat down. Eli nodded, keeping his emotions in check. "What did you want to talk about, Noah?" Noah took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly as he set his cup down. I wanted to say I'm sorry, Eli. For everything. I know I hurt you, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted to tell you that I regret what I did. I regret betraying you." Eli listened, his heart calm and steady. It was strange, hearing Noah's apology after all this time, but it didn't stir up the pain that it once might have. He had healed, and he knew that what had happened between them was no longer a part of his present. "I appreciate you saying that," Eli replied, his voice measured. "It took me a long time to come to terms with what happened, but I've moved on, Noah. We both have. I hope you can find peace with that too." Noah nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm glad you've found someone, Eli. Julian seems like a good guy." Eli smiled softly. "He is." There was a pause, and for the first time since their breakup, Eli realized that he didn't feel anger or bitterness toward Noah. In fact, he felt a strange sense of relief. The chapter with Noah had ended, and though it had been painful, it had taught him something important, that love didn't have to be perfect, but it did have to be honest. After a brief, amicable conversation, they parted ways. Eli watched Noah walk away, feeling lighter than he had in a long time. It wasn't the dramatic confrontation he had once imagined it would be. Instead, it was quiet, simple, and exactly what he needed to close that part of his life for good. Later that evening, Eli returned to the home he now shared with Julian. The house was filled with warmth, laughter, and the smell of Julian's cooking. Eli had found a new kind of love, one that wasn't built on grand gestures or fleeting passion, but on trust, communication, and mutual respect. As they sat down for dinner, Julian poured them both a glass of wine, his eyes sparkling with affection as he met Eli's gaze. "To us," Julian said, raising his glass. "And to new beginnings." Eli smiled, clinking his glass against Julian's. To new beginnings. In that moment, Eli realized that he had not only moved on, but he had also found something deeper, something stronger than he had ever imagined. Julian was his partner in every sense of the word, someone who understood him, supported him, and loved him unconditionally. As the night wore on, and they laughed and talked about the future they were building together, Eli knew that this was the love he had always been searching for. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in the end, that was all that mattered. He had found his way through the heartbreak, through the uncertainty, and now, he stood on the other side, stronger, happier, and ready for whatever life had in store. And for the first time in a long time, Eli felt at peace. A few weeks later, Eli found himself truly settling into his new life with Julian. After months of healing and cautious progression, their relationship had blossomed into something solid, steady, and beautiful. Julian was everything Eli needed, patient, kind, and completely transparent. They had developed a rhythm together, one that wasn't rushed or forced. It was built on the solid ground of trust, and for the first time in a long time, Eli felt like he could breathe easily. New Orleans, with all its vibrant life and history, had become the backdrop to this new chapter in Eli's life. The city's charm, which once felt like a cage during the darker days of his breakup with Noah, now felt like a place of renewal. The music, the food, the people, everything seemed to come alive again as Eli started seeing the world with fresh eyes. One evening, as they strolled along the bustling French Quarter, hand in hand, Julian turned to Eli with a question that caught him off guard. "Eli, what do you think about moving in together?" Julian asked, his tone casual but the question itself heavy with meaning. Eli paused mid-step, looking at Julian, whose face was illuminated by the soft, golden streetlights. For a moment, the weight of the question lingered in the air between them. "We already spend most nights together," Julian added, sensing Eli's hesitation. "But I want us to take that next step, when you're ready." Eli thought about it. It wasn't a question of love or trust, those were both solid between them now. It was more about the symbolic nature of moving forward, of letting go of the final threads of the life he had once shared with Noah. "I've thought about it," Eli admitted, squeezing Julian's hand gently. "And, I think I'm ready." Julian smiled, a genuine look of happiness spreading across his face. "Really? No pressure, but I've been thinking about it for a while now. I just didn't want to rush you." Eli laughed softly. "I know, and I appreciate that. But I think this feels right. We've been through a lot, and I don't want to be stuck in the past anymore. I want to keep moving forward, with you." With that decision, they began the process of consolidating their lives. Julian moved into Eli's place, which was already filled with their shared memories, and together they began creating new ones. Eli found it surprising how natural the transition felt, how comfortable it was to share not just a home, but his life in an even deeper way. Months passed, and life became more balanced. Eli's work as a detective continued to challenge him, but now he had a sanctuary to come home to, a space filled with love and warmth. Julian, still working as a social worker, became a grounding force for Eli. Whenever a case felt overwhelming or when the weight of his job pressed down on him, Julian was there, offering a listening ear and wise advice. They often spent weekends together in the city, exploring the hidden corners of New Orleans, finding new cafes, jazz bars, and sometimes simply enjoying the quiet moments in their shared space. Eli's work, however, wasn't without its trials. One day, he found himself revisiting an old cold case that had resurfaced, one that eerily reminded him of the emotional journey he had gone through with Noah. It involved a missing couple, torn apart by betrayal and deception. The case was reopened when new evidence emerged, and Eli, with his sharp detective instincts, was brought on board. As he delved deeper into the details of the case, Eli couldn't help but see the parallels between his own past and the lives of the couple he was investigating. The husband had been unaware of his partner's affair for years, and when the truth had come out, it had shattered everything. Eli felt a pang of empathy for the man. He knew all too well the pain of betrayal and the slow, arduous process of rebuilding after trust had been broken. Working through this case was therapeutic for Eli in an unexpected way. It reminded him of how far he had come, of the wounds he had healed. More importantly, it made him appreciate Julian even more. Every time Eli came home after a long day, Julian was there, reminding him of the love and trust they had built, a stark contrast to the fractured relationship he had once been a part of. One night, after wrapping up a particularly grueling day on the cold case, Eli returned home, exhausted but relieved to see Julian waiting for him on the couch. The smell of Julian's cooking filled the house, and for a moment, Eli just stood at the doorway, taking it all in. "Rough day?" Julian asked, looking up from the book he was reading. "You have no idea," Eli sighed, walking over and sinking into the couch next to him. "But it's good to be home." Julian smiled, placing a hand on Eli's back, rubbing gently. "Home, huh? I like the sound of that." Eli leaned into the touch, closing his eyes and letting the stress of the day melt away. It wasn't the grand gestures or the dramatic moments that made Eli fall deeper in love with Julian. It was these quiet, simple moments, the ones that reminded Eli of how safe and loved he felt with him. "You know," Eli said after a few moments of comfortable silence, "I never thought I'd find this again. After everything that happened with Noah, I didn't think I'd be able to trust someone like this." Julian didn't say anything at first, but his hand stilled on Eli's back, a silent acknowledgement of the weight of Eli's words. "I'm glad you did," Julian finally said, his voice soft but full of sincerity. "Because you deserve this, Eli. You deserve to be happy." Eli opened his eyes, turning to look at Julian, who was watching him with such tenderness that it made his heart ache, but in the best way possible. "I am happy," Eli whispered. "Because of you." Time passed, and their life together settled into a beautiful, fulfilling routine. The trials of the past were still there, always present as small scars on Eli's heart, but they no longer defined him. He had found love again, a love built on trust, mutual respect, and a deep understanding of one another. Eli no longer feared the future. With Julian by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next, confident that they could handle anything together. As they lay in bed one night, with the soft hum of the city outside their window, Eli turned to Julian, his heart full. "I love you," he said, the words easy and true. Julian smiled, pulling Eli closer. "I love you too, Eli. More than you know." In that moment, Eli realized that he had come full circle. The pain of the past had shaped him, but it hadn't broken him. He had moved on, grown stronger, and found a love that was deeper and more meaningful than anything he had ever known. And for the first time in a long time, Eli felt completely at peace.